Hey, welcome to 19 Tone, the channel that's like 12 Tone, but the perfect fit that's a little out of tune. It's not terrible or anything, it's just a little flat. Anyway, I have a whole bunch to get through today. I even made a list to make sure I didn't forget anything. I'll put time codes to the various sections down in the description if you want to skip ahead, although I would appreciate if you watch the whole thing, but it's your time. Anyway, the first thing I want to talk about is sponsors. I've been doing these pretty consistently for close to a year now, and if I'm being honest, I don't really like doing them. To be clear, it's not because I don't like my sponsors. I think they're all good companies with good products, and I use most of them. It's just that if my primary income is from sponsorships, then my financial incentives don't line up with my goals. Basically, what I want to be focusing on is producing high-quality, well-produced, well-presented, well-reasoned music theory videos, but right now most of what I'm getting paid for is my ability to influence your purchasing habits, which is something I'm not very good at, and also I don't like. I won't get into all the details. I already made a video about my feelings on this a while back, but the main thing is that there's a lot of ways that I could be doing sponsor reads better that I just don't feel comfortable with. For now, I'm just not doing those things and trying to keep my reads as ethical as possible, and I intend to keep doing that, but as long as my financial incentives point in a different direction, there will always be that tension, and I'd really rather there wasn't. But running 12 Tone is a full-time job at this point, which means it needs to be paying me enough to live, so what I'd like to do is try to transfer some of my income from sponsorships over to Patreon. Patreon growth has been slow since I started doing sponsorships, and that's totally fair, I completely understand. But the thing is, right now, Patreon is my only major source of income that's paying me directly for the quality of my work. That is, I believe, my ideal financial incentive, but I do understand the idea that if sponsors are already paying me, your Patreon dollars may be better spent elsewhere, so to try and balance that out, I've set a couple new Patreon goals where I'm just going to stop doing as many sponsorships if I get to certain levels of support. They're not all completely realistic in the short term, but hopefully if I can step back on sponsorships, then that will encourage more growth, and we can reach them eventually. In the end, what I'd like to be doing is making enough money to live without doing any sponsorships, although I will probably keep the door open for specific partnerships like the one with Apple Records. But those would be more about resources and access to let me make videos I couldn't otherwise make than just about getting paid. So yeah, if you can afford it, I would really appreciate your Patreon support, but if you can't, as always, don't worry about it, you don't owe me that money. Speaking of Patreon though, I do want to talk a bit about a specific Patreon tier, the Elephant of the Month Club. This is a tier at which every month I will mail a hand-drawn elephant to your house. It's been a lot of fun to do, but because it's one of the higher tiers, it's not super populated, and that totally makes sense. But I think it would be more fun to be sending these out to more people, so if you are at that level, please give me your address, and if you're not and this sounds interesting, maybe check it out. Anyway, that's it for Patreon right now. The next thing I want to talk about is a podcast. Basically, at VidCon I met Noah from Polyphonic, who I assume many of you are aware of, and he and I got talking about music, and it became clear pretty quickly that we enjoyed talking to each other about it. It's a really interesting mix because he and I obviously both love music, but we come at it from very different perspectives. I'm a more theoretical, analytical person, obviously if you've seen my work, whereas Noah is more interested in cultures and stories. Anyway, it seemed like a good pairing. We pretty quickly started talking about doing a podcast, and long story short, we're recording our first episode next week. It's going to be fairly open. We'll be talking about basically whatever we want to talk about within the realm of music, but one thing that we did want to do was a mailbag where we take some audience questions. So if you have anything that you'd like to hear Noah and I talk about, we set up an email at 12tonepolyphonic@gmail.com. There's a link to that in the description, and please hit us up. We'll be picking some of our favorites to talk about in that very first episode. If you want more updates on that, just follow us both on Twitter. We'll be talking about it more there, and when it releases, I'm sure we'll both mention it in our videos. And speaking of Polyphonic, I wanted to briefly talk about Nebula. Basically, myself and a bunch of other video creators have been really frustrated with YouTube recently, and we figured why not build our own platform? It's completely creator-run, it has no algorithm, we just put our videos on there, you can subscribe to whatever you want. It is a subscription model, it had to be to pay for hosting and traffic and whatnot, but it's only $5 a month, and there are some of YouTube's best educational creators over there, and also, for some reason, me. They're even producing some original series, I don't know, including an ongoing one called Working Titles with rotating hosts talking about their favorite television theme songs. Polyphonic's video on Game of Thrones is already out, and my video on The Prisoner comes out in October, so if you want to check those out, there's a link to Nebula in the description. Anyway, next thing, topic suggestions. Basically, last year I did a couple videos about fake music theory terms. These were the negative time signatures video and the dark motifs one, and they were super fun. They're some of my favorite videos I've ever made. I got to play around in some fun conceptual spaces and work on explanations for things that didn't actually exist. But the problem is, it's a hard thing to force. These terms both came from somewhere, and I can't necessarily reproduce that on my own. I don't want to be just picking random words just to make more of these videos, but I would like to make more of these videos so I figured I'd open it up to y'all. If you have any suggestions for things that sound like music theory terms but aren't, leave them in the description. They could be expansions on a pre-existing idea like negative time signatures, or they could just be wordplay like the dark motifs one. Whatever you've got, let me know, and if I happen to like it, I may make a video on it. Anyway, the next thing is the intro sequence. You may have noticed in this video that it's not in the same place it used to be. Basically, I'm experimenting with a cold open format where I talk a little bit about the thing first, do the intro, and then go into the main video. The problem with intro sequences on YouTube videos is that they tend to lose people. I'm competing for attention with a whole sidebar of interesting videos, so if I want you to stay, I need to explain why you should pretty quickly. The intro sequence doesn't do that, so I'm experimenting with not opening with it, but I really like it, and it's pretty iconic at this point, I think, so I wanted to put it somewhere. Let me know what you think. Anyway, next on my list is merch stuff, which I'm not sure why that's there because I can't really talk about this too much yet, but I am planning to open a new merch store soon. Basically, I got contacted by a dude who had a really cool idea for a music product, and we worked together to make something I'm really proud of. That's going to be coming out next month, but I wanted to give you a heads up. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is the guest videos. The short version here is I probably won't be doing them again. I should right off the bat say I'm very happy with the videos themselves. I think Andrew, Ngassi, Cheryl, and Micah all did a fantastic job, and if I knew then what I know now, I would have picked the exact same 4 people. Honestly, before I started publishing, I was pretty sure I was going to do this again. I really enjoyed that part of the process, but the videos did not perform. There was a really polarized reaction and they all sort of flopped. As for why, I have some speculations as to why this might not have worked as well for me as it did for someone like Tom Scott, some of which I could have done better and some of which is just the nature of the different types of content we produce. But the important thing is that it didn't, and with the YouTube algorithm the way it is, I can't really afford to be taking these risks. Then again, I have Nebula for experiments now, so maybe next year I'll do it again and just put them there. But I should be clear, I'm glad I ran the experiment. The videos again were fantastic and I'm proud to have had the chance to host them. And besides, I think it's important to try new things. The YouTube algorithm wants my channel to stagnate. It wants me to take the things that have been working and continue doing those forever. But that's not what I want, and I don't think it's what my audience wants either. If 12-tone is going to continue, it needs to evolve. The guest videos were an experiment to see if that was a direction I could go in, and it turns out probably not, but I still want to try other directions. Does this mean not every 12-tone video is going to do particularly well? Yeah, and I'm okay with that. I started this channel to make things I wanted to make, and 4 years later, that's still my primary goal. I'm just doing it on a bigger stage. So hopefully you'll come along with me on my next experiment, but if not, that's fine. I'm just gonna keep doing them anyway. So yeah, I think that's basically everything I had to say. I know this video probably went super long, but thanks for sticking around if you did. I'll have some more updates for you on some of those projects in the coming months, so again, if you follow me on Twitter, that's probably the best place to keep track of what I'm doing, and probably the best place to get responses to things too if you have questions. Although, if they're for me and Polyphonic, again, the email address, 12tonepolyphonic@gmail.com. But yeah, it's been 4 years and I've had a lot of fun, so hopefully it keeps going. I'll see you next time and keep on rocking.